Deep in the mountains of West Virginia, something massive moves through the trees at night. It's pure white, covered in thick wool, and stands over 8 feet tall. This is the Sheepsquatch, and it's still hunting. The first modern sightings began in the 1990s in the remote hollows around Point Pleasant and Braxton County. Witnesses described a creature that looked like a giant sheep crossed with a bear, massive, muscular body covered in thick white wool, a long sheep-like snout, and glowing red eyes. But it didn't walk on 4 legs like an animal. It walked upright like a man. The most disturbing reports came from people who were in their cars at night. The Sheepsquatch would step out of the tree line, stand in the road, and stare directly at them. Some drivers said it would charge the vehicle, slamming into the side hard enough to rock it. Others described a powerful, musky odor that lingered for days afterward, like wet wool mixed with something rotten. What makes the Sheepsquatch different from most cryptids is the consistency of the encounters. Hunters, truck drivers, and even park rangers have reported the same creature over the last 30 years. Footprints have been found, large 3-toed impressions pressed deep into the mud. And unlike Bigfoot, the Sheepsquatch is consistently aggressive. It doesn't run away, it watches, it follows, and sometimes it attacks. To this day, locals in the remote parts of West Virginia still warn visitors, if you see a large white shape moving through the trees at night, do not stop. Do not shine your light on it. Just keep driving. Because the Sheepsquatch isn't just a legend. It's still out there, and it's still very, very hungry. A shadow passes over the mountain ridge at dusk. Not a bird, not a plane, something massive. Something with wings made of metal and a beak full of teeth. This is the Snallygaster, the dragon that still hunts the skies of West Virginia. In the early 1700s, German settlers in the Blue Ridge Mountains began reporting a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. They called it the Schnellergeist, the quick spirit. Over time, the legend took on a terrifying new shape, a colossal dragon-like beast with a metallic beak lined with razor-sharp teeth, leathery wings, and a cluster of long, whipping tentacles hanging from its body. This wasn't a shy forest creature. The Snallygaster was an aerial predator. It would dive from the clouds without warning, snatch full-grown cattle, sheep, and even lone travelers, then disappear back into the mist before anyone could react. Its screech sounded like a steam whistle mixed with tearing metal. Its skin was said to be so tough that bullets bounced right off. The sightings reached a fever pitch in 1909. The creature became so infamous that President Theodore Roosevelt reportedly canceling a trip to Europe just to hunt it himself. Local newspapers ran daily updates. Farmers painted 7-pointed stars on their barns, an old folk charm meant to keep the beast away. The chilling part? The Snallygaster didn't just kill. It left behind a foul, sulfurous stench that lingered for days. Some witnesses claimed it wasn't purely biological, that its body sounded like clanging metal when its wings struck the trees. Legend says the beast finally met its end when it crashed into a giant vat of boiling moonshine and perished. But many locals believe it simply retreated into the deep, lightless caves of the Appalachians, waiting. Today, when a sudden shadow blots out the sun or a metallic screech echoes through the hollows, people don't look up at the sky. They know the Snallygaster never truly died. It's still up there, still hungry. A low growl echoes through the trees at night. Not from a bear, not from a wolf. It's deeper, heavier, and it's coming from something that stands on 2 legs. Deep in the ancient hollows of the Appalachian Mountains, Hundreds of people have come face to face with the Dogman, a 7-foot-tall creature with the body of a man and the head of a wolf. This is not a Hollywood werewolf. This is a living, breathing predator that walks upright, moves with terrifying intelligence, and hunts with a hunger that feels almost personal. Witnesses describe the same chilling pattern. First, the forest goes completely silent. Then comes the dead zone. Even experienced hunting dogs freeze, whimper, and hide under trucks. Suddenly, the Dogman appears. Massive shoulders, long, powerful arms, glowing yellow or amber eyes, and a long muzzle filled with teeth. It doesn't just run, it stalks. People have seen it pacing alongside cars at 50 miles per hour on all fours, then rising onto 2 legs with unnatural grace the moment the vehicle stops. The most disturbing part? The intelligence in its eyes. Survivors say it doesn't look at you like an animal. It looks at you like it knows exactly what you are, and it's enjoying your fear. Unlike Bigfoot, which is often described as shy, the Dogman is aggressive. It bares its teeth. It emits a deep, low-frequency growl that you feel in your chest. It has been known to follow hikers for miles, staying just out of sight, clicking its teeth against tree trunks as it moves. To this day, the Dogman remains one of the most consistent and terrifying cryptid reports in the Appalachians. Hunters, rangers, and locals all tell the same story. In these mountains, something is at the very top of the food chain, and we are not it. A lantern swings in the darkness on an abandoned railroad track. There is no train. There is no one holding it. And yet, it keeps swinging. This is the Maco Ghost Light, the eternal signal of a man who lost his head trying to save a train. In 1867, on a rainy night in North Carolina, Conductor Joe Baldwin realized his passenger car had detached and was sitting motionless on the tracks. A freight train was barreling toward him at full speed. In one final act of bravery, Joe stood on the rear platform, desperately waving his lantern to warn the oncoming engineer. The collision was catastrophic. Joe was decapitated. His body was thrown into the swamp, and his head was never found. But the lantern kept burning. For over a century, engineers on the Wilmington and Manchester Railroad reported the same chilling sight, a single amber light swinging back and forth in the middle of the tracks, inside the Maco Tunnel. No matter how fast they approached, the light would never move out of the way. The train would pass straight through it, and the crew would be left in a suddenly freezing cabin, hearts pounding. In 1962, the U.S. Army even investigated it with infrared equipment and powerful searchlights. They found nothing. No wires, no gas, no explanation. Yet the light continued to appear. In 1977, the railroad removed the tracks, and just like that, the Maco light finally went dark. But locals still say that on foggy nights, if you stand where the old tracks used to be, you can sometimes see a faint glow in the mist. And if you listen closely, you can hear the distant sound of a train that never arrives. Some duties are so important that even death cannot end them. Joe Baldwin is still out there, still waving his lantern, still trying to stop a train that crashed over 150 years ago. A woman in a white dress stands in the middle of the railroad tracks inside a dark tunnel. She doesn't move, she doesn't scream, she just raises her arm and waves as the train rushes straight toward her. This is the Silver Run Tunnel Ghost, the most famous phantom of the Appalachian rails. In the late 1800s, a young woman was traveling to her wedding when she mysteriously disappeared near tunnel number 19 in West Virginia. Her body was never found, but soon engineers on the Baltimore and Ohio line began seeing her, a lady in a flowing white gown, standing directly on the tracks inside the tunnel. No matter how hard they slammed on the brakes, the train would pass right through her. The crew would emerge from the tunnel shaking, the cabin suddenly ice cold. One night, engineer Bill Richardson swore he would never stop for the hallucination again. But as his train roared into the tunnel, the lady in white didn't stand on the tracks. She appeared on the front of the moving locomotive, her face pressed against the glass of the cab, staring directly at him with hollow, desperate eyes. When the train finally cleared the tunnel, he ran to check the front. There was no body, but the steel engine was covered in thick white frost. Years later, during track repairs, workers found a shallow, unmarked grave near the tunnel entrance. Inside were the remains of a young woman and a rusted locket. They gave her a proper burial, hoping it would finally bring her peace. But the lady in white never left. To this day, hikers exploring the abandoned tunnel report the faint smell of funeral lilies and the sight of a pale figure waving from the darkness. Some journeys are so important that even death cannot stop them. She is still waiting for her train to arrive.
An old hermit living alone in a cabin deep in the Appalachian woods made one fatal mistake. He was starving. So when a strange creature with yellow eyes and a long, bushy tail crawled into his home, he didn't think twice. He raised his axe and chopped the tail clean off. Then he cooked it and ate it. That night, the scratching began. It started at the door, then on the walls, then on the roof, and finally right under his bed. A low, rasping voice whispered through the darkness, "Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo." The man sent his dogs outside to chase the sound. One by one, the dogs vanished into the night. No barking, no fighting, just silence, followed by the scratching getting closer. He barricaded the door. He loaded his rifle, but the voice kept coming, now from inside the walls, then from the ceiling, then directly above his head. The final night, the man woke up to see two glowing yellow eyes staring at him from the foot of the bed. The creature was no longer hiding. It was sitting there, perfectly still, its severed tail stump twitching. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was right in his ear. "Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo." When the sun rose the next morning, the cabin was empty. No blood, no struggle, only the axe lying on the floor and a set of long claw marks leading out the door and into the woods. To this day, people living in the remote hollows of Appalachia still hear it on quiet nights, that low, rasping voice calling from the darkness. "Tailypo, I want my Tailypo." Some things you eat end up eating you back.
In the winter of 1954, the small town of Bladenboro, North Carolina was under attack by something that didn't just kill, it drained its victims dry. Dogs, cats, and livestock were found completely exsanguinated, with only 2 small puncture wounds on the neck. No claw marks, no torn flesh, just 2 perfect holes, and not a drop of blood left in the body. They called it the Beast of Bladenboro, a sleek, jet-black cat nearly 5 feet long, moving like liquid shadow through the swamps. It didn't roar, it screamed, a high-pitched wail that sounded disturbingly like a crying baby, and when it struck, it did so with surgical precision. Over 1,000 armed men, many of them war veterans, formed massive hunting parties. They combed the swamps with dogs and shotguns. The creature seemed to mock them. It would kill on one side of town, then appear miles away minutes later, leaving behind another bloodless corpse. The dogs refused to track it. They would cower and whine, tails between their legs, as if they knew exactly what was hunting them. The terror peaked when the beast began leaving the animals and turning its attention toward people. Witnesses reported seeing a large black cat with glowing eyes watching them from the tree line. Then came the real horror, the sickness. People who got too close started suffering convulsions, swollen throats, and violent vomiting, symptoms identical to chemical warfare. The official explanation? A large bobcat. They even displayed one to calm the public, but the locals knew better. A bobcat doesn't drain a full-grown hound of every drop of blood. A bobcat doesn't make the forest go dead silent before it strikes. To this day, the beast of Bladenboro is still whispered about in the swamps of North Carolina. Some say it's still out there, still hungry, still waiting for the next warm body to wander too close to the water's edge. If you break the rules of Lent for 7 years straight, something comes for you. It doesn't knock, it doesn't speak, it just waits in the dark until you're alone. Then it steps out of the shadows wearing your face. This is the Rougarou, the Cajun werewolf that followed the mountain creeks north from Louisiana into the deep hollows of the Appalachians. According to the old French Catholic legends, the Rougarou is the punishment for those who violate the sacred fast. For 7 years, they ignore the rules, and on the 7th, they wake up changed, still human from the neck down, but with the head of a starving, red-eyed wolf. The body remains theirs. The hunger is not. The creature doesn't hunt like a normal wolf. It stalks with cold intelligence. It waits for the forest to go dead silent. No birds, no insects, just the sound of your own breathing. Then it begins to mimic. It calls your name in the voice of your mother, your child, or your best friend. If you answer, it steps out. Those who have seen it describe the same nightmare. A tall figure with a human body, but the head of a wolf, eyes glowing with the tortured awareness of the person it once was. It doesn't attack immediately. It wants you to see what you could become. The Rougarou is more than a monster. It's a moral warning. Mothers in the Appalachian hollows still tell their children, if you hear a familiar voice calling your name after dark, do not answer. Because sometimes the person standing in the trees isn't your father. Sometimes it's the Rougarou, and it's looking for its next 7-year sentence. And in these mountains, the curse is still very much alive. In the deep south and the Appalachian foothills, there is a predator that doesn't breathe, doesn't run, and doesn't need teeth. It just grows. 60 feet in a single season, and once it starts, it never stops. They call it kudzu, the vine that ate the South. What began as a simple soil stabilizer became a living nightmare. It swallows forests, buries houses, and wraps around abandoned cars until they disappear completely. But in the most overgrown hollows of the mountains, the legend takes a darker turn. People say the vines don't just cover things, they become them. They call them the Kudzu People, human-shaped figures made entirely of twisting green vines and heart-shaped leaves. They stand perfectly still at the edge of the forest, blending into the foliage. If you look too long, they begin to move, slowly, creaking like old wood, reaching toward you with tendrils that grow faster than you can run. The horror is in the silence. Under a thick canopy of kudzu, the world goes dead. No birds, no wind, just the heavy, wet smell of rotting vegetation. People who have fallen asleep in their cars near these patches have woken up to find the doors fused shut and the windows completely covered by a living green web, slowly pressing inward. The kudzu doesn't just hide what it consumes, it becomes it. Entire houses vanish beneath the vines, turning into green rib cages where the Kudzu people are said to live. Local legend warns, if you stand still too long in a kudzu thicket at twilight, you can feel the tendrils begin to coil around your ankles, not by accident, but with slow, vegetable hunger. It is a chilling reminder that nature doesn't always need claws and teeth to be a monster. Sometimes it just needs enough time and enough shade. A woman in a white dress stands on the bank of the French Broad River at dawn. She has no head, only a glowing stump where it should be, and she is waving at the water as if waiting for someone who never arrives. This is the Headless Woman of the French Broad, the most famous ghost in Tennessee. The legend begins over 100 years ago. A young woman was brutally murdered near the river's edge, some say by a jealous lover, others by a highwayman. Her body was thrown into the cold, churning water. Her head was never found. Now she is a permanent part of the morning mist. Fishermen and river guides still see her, a pale figure in a waterlogged gown, standing perfectly still on the bank. She doesn't speak, she doesn't scream. She simply raises her arm and waves, slow, mechanical, desperate, toward the dark water. Those who have seen her describe the same chilling feeling. The sound of the river suddenly goes quiet, and a heavy, unnatural cold settles over the area. Many say that seeing the Headless Woman is an omen, a warning that the river is hungry again. In one documented case, a fisherman saw her waving frantically just before his boat capsized in calm water. He barely made it to shore. When he looked back, she was gone. To this day, on foggy mornings along the French Broad, people still report the faint scent of funeral lilies and the sight of a pale figure standing where no living person could be. She never leaves the riverbank. She never stops waving. Some journeys are so important that even death cannot stop them. She is still waiting for her ride home. That's 10 Appalachian mysteries that still haunt the mountains. Which one chilled you the most? Write in the comments. The best answers may be featured next time. Subscribe and hit the bell for more real, unexplained cases. Stay vigilant.